All right, the Final Four is set. The All-Texas battle between Baylor and Houston just before 5:15 Eastern Time on CBS this Saturday, followed by the West Coast battle between Gonzaga and UCLA. Huge spread there. UCLA, an 11 seed, trying to become the highest seed to ever reach a national championship game. No seed over an 8 has ever reached the Natty, which will be played Monday night. Let's go out to Indianapolis right now. We've got Matt Norlander and Jerry Palm just outside Lucas Oil Stadium for us. UCLA, the first team in history to make the Final Four after losing at least 4 straight entering the tournament. Jerry, we were following your bracketology all year long. How close were the Bruins from totally missing out on this whole thing?
Oh, they were very close. They were very close in the minds of me and people who do the thing that I do, but also the committee, who obviously put them in the first 4. And then they were down 14 in that game, so I almost didn't get out of it. Ended up winning in overtime, winning 2 games in overtime on this trip to the Final Four. The first 11 seed to get to the Final Four, beating both a 1 and a 2 seed on the way. The second team to have to win 5 games to get to the Final Four, joining VCU as a first 4 to the Final Four run. So it's really a remarkable ride that UCLA has been on, and probably the most unexpected given how they were playing entering the NCAA tournament, and just lucky to get here. No double-digit seed has ever reached a national championship game. UCLA, a huge underdog against Gonzaga. We'll talk about that in a second. But, Matt, just put this into perspective, what UCLA has been able to do in this tournament. They're not overly impressive every game, but when it's close in the end, they always manage to get it done.
Yes, they do, and I spoke with UCLA staff actually leading into that regional final, and the mood around the team, the reason for optimism and confidence has been growing with each game. And basically, you want to know why they've been able to get here. They had an off half to start in the first 4 against Michigan State, and since then, they have been able to play on the defensive end at the level Mick Cronin has been demanding, and clearly we saw that come to fruition. I think even beyond the hopes and expectations of the staff. Holding Michigan to 49 points, obviously a season low there, that was huge. It was a throwback to the way that Cincinnati played under Cronin and what ultimately landed him this UCLA job just 2 years ago. So I understand Johnny Juzang has certainly been the headliner, but defensively UCLA has been pedestrian for most of the season, and it has been able to flip a switch. Jerry mentioned VCU a decade ago. The reason the Rams made the Final Four is they were aberrationally good from 3-point range once they got to the tournament. UCLA, on the other hand, has been way better on the defensive end than it had showed for much of the season leading up to the tournament.
Only giving up 49 points last night in the win over Michigan. That officially gave us the most official upsets in tournament history, according to the NCAA. Yet it seems, Matt, like Gonzaga might be immune to any of this chaos. Are they untouchable?
I'm not saying – you just said it. We've had more upsets in this tournament than any other before in terms of how the NCAA categorizes such things. So I'm not going to get on HQ right now and say that Gonzaga is untouchable. But what I will admit is when I watched last night in person, just a casual annihilation. It's the casualness of how they're doing this. I did think near the end of that second half, I thought, are we going to be talking Monday night after the title game about an undefeated Gonzaga team that wasn't even pushed at all in this tournament? Is their most recent difficult game going to be that BYU championship in the WCC final where, oh, by the way, they still won by 10 points? Jerry, I don't know if they're untouchable, but I'll tell you this. No matter what happens from here throughout, if a loss does come to me, this team is already one of the 3 most impressive, 3 best teams of the past 20 years, potentially with that 2015 Kentucky team, which didn't win at all, or 2012 Kentucky, 09 Carolina. They're phenomenal, and they're obviously tracking toward an easy championship at this point.
They've been ridiculous. They're not just the top offensive team in college basketball. They're the top scoring margin team. As you pointed out, the BYU game, they struggled, still won by double digits. Only one team has gotten within double digits of this team all year. That's West Virginia. So when you're leading in scoring margin, it's not just the offense, but they're playing good defense as well. And we really saw that against USC. They completely throttled USC, turned them over. This game was over at the first TV timeout. You could tell. We were watching in the second half. My wife and I were like, they look bored. Are they going to just – they're just playing casual. Like you said, casual. They are that good. I don't know what UCLA can do with them. I don't know who beats Gonzaga without significant help from Gonzaga.
27th consecutive victory by double digits. They've covered every game, and it's a 2-touchdown point spread in the national semifinal. 13.5, 14-point spread against UCLA. Matt, give us your early lean.
My early lean is Gonzaga here. Now, early lean. Let's check in tomorrow. I'll check in with both teams, both coaching staff, see how they're feeling. But I have no reason not to go with the Zags at this point, because now, when you reach this stage, the Final Four, and you are 2 wins away from immortality. And by the way, here's the reason why I go to the Gonzaga with the early lean. Drew Timme has been the best player in this tournament. Does UCLA have anybody that can really stop him? I'm not seeing it, because you know what? USC had Evan Mobley, and that wasn't a success. Corey Kispert and Jalen Suggs have merely been B to B plus level at this point, and they still got Joel Ayayi, who, by the way, had a triple-double in a game earlier this season, the only one in Gonzaga's program's history. So my early lean is Gonzaga, because I agree with Jerry. There have been certain points in games where it's not that they haven't necessarily looked engaged. They just look like they're coasting, that they're cruising. UCLA, I think, can put up an interesting fight. But Hassel, my early lean is Gonzaga to win and to cover that spread.
It's been Gonzaga 1 and Baylor 2 for pretty much the whole season, and that's what it seems like heading into the Final Four. Any other year, Matt, most years, I guess I would say, would Gonzaga be the best team in college basketball? I'm sorry, would Baylor be the best team in college basketball?
Maybe not any other year. They're still really, really good. But they are rightfully in the conversation right now, right there with Gonzaga. At CBSSports.com, I've got a piece up right now on the 8 storylines to know, and one of those, one of the top 3 is Gonzaga Baylor, not only in inevitability, but everyone wants to see that. And this has actually been, I think this is a perk for the Final Four for this tournament. Throughout December, in January and into early February, it was Gonzaga and Baylor and then everyone else. When Baylor had that COVID pause, from an efficiency and performance standpoint, they actually took a step back. Gonzaga is on a tier by itself, but I think it's actually a really, really good thing for this Final Four that these two teams have made it this far. We don't often get this, where you have a top 2 team situation throughout a season, and then you get to the national semifinals, and they're still there. And also, Jerry, remember, Mark Few and Scott Drew in the late summer, when the Pac-12 initially canceled its non-conference, both Gonzaga and Baylor lost their Pac-12 non-conference games. They scheduled to play each other in December, and then they lost that game 2 hours before it was supposed to be played right here in Indianapolis. We're not guaranteed the game, but it does feel a little bit like destiny, a matchup we should have had more than 2 months ago. We might get on Monday night.
I'm not the kind of guy that normally roots for chalk unless my team is chalk. But, this is a game that college basketball deserves. They were the 2 best teams all season long, as you point out, until Baylor's COVID pause, where they took a little bit of a step back. Also, they're playing in the Big 12, and they have so many great teams in the Big 12 this year that it seemed inevitable that Baylor was probably going to take a loss at some point. But Baylor, at their best, is probably the only team that can challenge Gonzaga. And I think college basketball, with this crazy season and what everybody had to put up with just to get through this season, to get a Gonzaga-Baylor game as a championship game, I think would be the best thing for college basketball, the best way to top off this season. And it would be the best win for Gonzaga this season and would even more legitimize what was already a dominant national championship if they get it.
Houston fans are saying, hang on, we got a shot here against Baylor. But this is going to be the first single-digit seed that Houston is going to see in this tournament, Matt. They've beaten a 10, an 11, a 12, a 15. How do you expect Houston to perform against a top-level team for the first time?
I expect them to perform very well. Houston's actually rated better in efficiency margin and per some predictive metrics than Baylor. Narrowly, as of late, Baylor actually sits ahead of Houston right now. They're fairly close. I actually think the line's a little bigger than it should be here. The wonderful thing about Houston is it will get into a fist fight with you. It will play the way it wants to play. It will bring you to its level, whether that's raising it or lowering it. And Marcus Sasser continues to be a little bit of an overlooked important factor on this team, because Quentin Grimes, former 5-star prospect, played at Kansas. He's been their best player. I voted for him on our 3rd-team All-American team at CBSSports.com, and Grimes is the best player. But between Sasser and then Jajon Giroux, who continues to fight through a hip issue, I do think that Houston's got a really solid shot here, Jerry, of giving Baylor a good push, not just because of the offensive rebounds. That's clearly a big time factor there. But I do think the toughness of their guards and their propensity to maybe get this game into the low 60s will give them a shot. Now, we'll talk Arlene in just a second here, but I don't dismiss Houston because they haven't had to face a single-digit seed yet. I think if Houston had to play Illinois, they would have had a healthy chance at beating the Illini if they met them in Elite Eight. What about you?
I think Houston's style always gives them a chance, right? I mean, you described it as a fist fight. I think of Houston as a street-fighting team. You know, they're going to go after you hard, period. Defensive side of the ball, offensive side of the ball. They're going to be physical as the referees will let them get away with. And I think that's partly why they're such a great rebounding team, especially an offensive rebounding team. I don't really think that Houston is a fantastic offensive team in terms of shooting. I mean, Grimes is terrific, and they get contributions from others, like you point out. But when you're getting a lot of second and sometimes third shots, you can cover up a shooting deficiency. And that's what Houston's really done. But their calling card is defense. Their calling card is physicality. They're not a lot of fun to play. And Baylor's going to have to match that. And they're going to have to do that probably better than they did, I think, even against Arkansas, which isn't that physical of a team. My concern for Baylor is they got away from what they do well offensively. They're a fantastic three-point shooting team. And against Arkansas, it was all dribble drives, and the ball was stagnant. They're not going to be able to do that against Houston.
Houston, a 5-point dog against Baylor. Matt, you kind of hinted that you thought the line was a little bit too big. Houston, I mean, because of their defense, they keep games close, and it usually comes down to the final minute. What's your early lean?
Early lean, I've been vacillating on this just a little bit, but I will go with Houston to cover in this spot. Early lean on this. I do think that their defense will be good enough. And Baylor, a wonderful three-point shooting team, the best in the sport, but we have seen instances in the past where number one, number two level seeded teams, you know, sometimes you can just have an unlucky night. Houston's got a certain knack about them that induces teams into those. So the number's just a little too big. I will lean Houston in this spot early to cover that with Baylor winning outright in that game.
Okay, so Baylor and Gonzaga, the likely national championship game on Monday. We also have our Naismith Watch, which is presented by Jersey Mike Subs. These are the 4 finalists. Corey Kispert, the only one still playing for the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Luka Garza is the favorite to win it. The winner will be announced this Sunday on CBS Sports Network. Matt, who are you going with for the Naismith Men's Player of the Year?
So I'm going to go with Luka Garza in this spot. Now, what's fascinating about that list right there, Chris, is that Drew Timme should be a finalist over Corey Kispert. If you are to take into consideration the tournament play up to this point, which I think is the right move. You know, you don't let the championship and the Final Four completely override the regular season, but the regular season should matter heavily with some rightful influence over tournament performance. Luka Garza, on the whole, his numbers this season, what he's been able to put up, second leading scorer in America, the preseason National Player of the Year, that almost never happens, by the way. He would still be my pick. But I tell you what, the gap has narrowed. I would actually have Drew Timme, even though he's not a finalist there, what he's been able to do for Gonzaga and be Gonzaga's best player, be the best player in this tournament, he's not that far behind. But Luka Garza does deserve this. He was the National Player of the Year. He was the best player in the Big Ten and helped Iowa to a 2 seed. Just because they failed to advance in the tournament doesn't mean that Garza should be discarded in this regard. He would be my pick, Naismith Player of the Year, the big man out of Iowa.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Garza was fantastic. And let's face it, Iowa didn't advance, but it wasn't Garza's fault. I mean, he had a fantastic game in the loss to Oregon. It was nobody else showed up. You know, Garza was a target in a league with great big men. Half the league had great big men this year, and Garza stood out among that crowd. And even the teams that had really good big men couldn't do much with him. And I think I'm with you. I think Garza is the National Player of the Year. And if Timme had been on that list, he might close, but I don't think Kispert has played well enough in this tournament to do that.
Yeah, Luka Garza had 36 points in a losing effort there in the second round for the Iowa Hawkeyes. He is the favorite to win the award. Our thanks to Matt Norlander and Jerry Palm. We'll be sending it back out to them throughout the afternoon and evening on HQ. We mentioned the Naismith Player of the Year is going to be announced Sunday on CBS Sports Network. We are going to have the exclusive announcement of the Naismith Defensive Player of the Year right here on HQ, noon Eastern, this Friday. Want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.